Hi, my name is Chuck Fall. I am the chief proponent for Green Liberty Caucus. I am speaking from Oregon, and I am representing the Oregon chapter of the Oregon Green Liberty Caucus. And our theme today is well, my guests are going to be with Emanuel, Mark Rolofson, activist Spyder, and we are reviewing a essay written by Mark, and he will read it and share, and we will have a roundtable discussion about it. The title is Voting for Lesser of Two Evils Has Led to Trump Dictatorship. Hard-hitting, powerful, scathing critique from Mark Rolofson. So just for some background, you are at a Zoom event of the Green Liberty Caucus. Again, we're in Oregon. We have a Oregon Greens website where we will post the recording of this, and where you can get stories on what's happening in Oregon in the Green Party, outside the Green Party, advancing the Green Liberty possibility. So I'm going to go straight back to Mark, and we're going to get the spotlight on you. Let's just actually, let me see. So Mark, you're going to share, and then we will debrief around what the arguments that you're making here. Right. And again, this is Green Liberty, and we're trying to explore what is important for the Green movement to be picking on and looking at closely in what's going on around the Trump presidency. And so, Mark, go ahead and begin your speech.
Voting for the lesser of two evils has led to Trump dictatorship. The Green Party has long been the canary in the coal mine. It is our duty to build a ground-up movement to take back our country from oligarchy. The urgency of this moment demands courage to denounce injustice and rally the Greens to fight tyranny. Under the leadership of Donald Trump, America is witnessing an unprecedented assault on free speech and due process of law. We are facing a constitutional crisis as Trump continues to defy two court rulings to return deported migrants to the United States who are now imprisoned in El Salvador's CDOT, where that's the Center for Terrorism Confinement Prison. Trump claims that those deported migrants are members of the dangerous criminal gangs MS-13 from El Salvador and Tren de Agua from Venezuela. The Trump administration has designated each of these gangs as terrorist organizations. No individual deported to CDOT was given a court hearing for their deportation and alleged ties to criminal gangs. 90% of them have no criminal record in the United States. They were grabbed off the streets by ICE agents and arrested before being deported. On April 10th, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia must be returned to the United States because his deportation was illegal due to a withholding order already in place barring his removal to El Salvador. He claims to have left that country to escape the MS-13 gang. Government officials admit his deportation was an administrative error. The Trump administration argues that since Garcia is in El Salvador, that the Supreme Court ruling does not apply, and the El Salvadoran government now has jurisdiction over his fate. The Supreme Court has refuted the Trump administration's argument as incorrect. The El Salvadoran president, Nayib Bukele, is refusing to release Garcia. The El Salvadoran government was paid $20,000 per head by the US government to house the migrants now designated as terrorists. Donald Trump has formed close ties with President Bukele. This constitutional crisis is taking place simultaneously with the arrest of foreign visa students and green card holders who have protested against Israel's Gaza genocide while supporting a free Palestine. The Trump administration claims the students are engaging engaging in anti-Semitic protests that support Hamas terrorists. Columbia graduate and permanent resident, U.S. resident Mahmoud Khalil was the first to be illegally arrested without a warrant by unidentified ICE agents and flown to a detention center in Louisiana. He has broken no laws and is married to an American citizen. He was involved as a negotiator between Palestinian rights student demonstrators and the Columbia University. The second arrested was Tufts University PhD student Romesa Ozturk, who merely co-authored an op-ed. Other arrests of law-abiding individuals have followed, with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, claiming to have a list of 300 students that the Trump administration plans to deport. In both cases, the excuse of terrorism was used to disregard the rule of law and the First Amendment. These blatant authoritarian acts have shocked the American people and people around the world. Most liberal critics will argue that these actions by the Trump administration are a radical departure from the norm. A look at the past 24 years shows this to be inaccurate. The Trump dictatorship is the logical progression of the steps taken towards fascism that began after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack, with the Patriot Act and incarcerating terror suspects at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Every presidential administration since 2001, whether Republican or Democrat, has continued the assault on civil liberties. Things have been heating up for decades, but most Americans have hardly noticed and have not been at all concerned. Now that the assault on civil liberties is coming to a boil, many people are alarmed. We are witnessing a dramatic shift from democracy to fascism. This shift has always had an imperialist agenda behind it that required suppressing dissent to control public opinion. The US government did not bring us to this point without some consent from the governed. It is the failure of the American people to break from the two-party system that has led to the rise of American fascism. The majority of Americans have continued to vote for their perceived lesser of two evils candidate. As long as Americans continue the back and forth between the duopoly parties, our country and our constitutional rights will continue to deteriorate. There is a growing angry grassroots opposition to Trump's policies, including the illegal deportations, along with the firing of federal workers and gutting of public agencies like the Social Security and Veterans Administrations. The nationwide hands-off protests saw huge turnouts. Bernie Sanders and AOC's Fight Oligarchy tour are Sanders' largest rallies ever. However, these events are designed to corral progressive activists inside the Democratic Party and not challenge the US imperialism and the Israel lobby. The hands-off protests have been organized by the Democratic Party and its front groups like Indivisible, along with people protesting for deportations and DOGE cuts, protesting against deportations and DOGE cuts. There is a large contingent of Ukraine flags opposing Trump's effort to end the war. There is a general absence of stop the Gaza genocide, stop bombing Yemen, and no war with Iran at the hands-off protests, while hands-off NATO was listed on the event's online posters. The Green Party has long been the canary in the coal mine. It is our duty to build a grassroots movement to take back our country from oligarchy. If America is ever to free itself from the stranglehold of the oligarchs, it must denounce the entire Washington, D.C. political establishment and not just the Trump administration. The urgency of this moment demands courage to denounce the injustice and fight tyranny. And that's it for starters.
Okay, so thank you, Mark. And so you do have more on that document.
Yes, but it's I have several talking points that we can go into that I highlighted this book by Naomi Wolf that was written in 2007.
So do this for us. Give us a quick skim through
Okay.
of summary statements of your additional talking points.
Well,
we're going to go to Emanuel.
I thought, right. I kind of thought, we could touch on this, but I wasn't going to start with it The End of America is a letter of warning to a young patriot. Was a book written by Naomi Wolf in 2007, a documentary that you can watch on YouTube, came out in 2008, about what's in the book. The book identifies the 10 steps that every country takes to become a fascist state, or in other words, closing down an open society. Every fascist government has used the excuse of terrorism to crack down on civil liberties. All 10 steps have been taken by the Bush administration, and the steps are, and this is something I think you can see what Donald Trump has done with the migrants, the immigrants that he claims are either gang members or, or supporting Hamas terrorists. Invoke an external and internal threat is the first one. 2, establish secret prisons. 3, develop a paramilitary force. 4, surveil ordinary citizens. 5, infiltrate citizen groups. 6, arbitrarily detain and release citizens. 7, target key individuals. 8, restrict the press. 9, cast criticism as espionage and dissent as treason. And 10, subvert the rule of law, which seems like Donald Trump is doing with by disregarding his Supreme Court rulings and judges' orders. So
Mark, are you satisfied that the Green Party establishment, Green Party, are being sufficiently critical of this problem that you're identifying with an emerging, dictatorship, as you call it?
Well, I think we need to be more critical. I mean, I think the Green Party has touched a bit on this territory. If you look and probably go on their platform, you're going to find stuff about civil liberties, et cetera, and Patriot Act specifically. That's something we should get rid of. But I think it needs to be really looked at very closely and campaigned on, even, because the democracy has been under assault. Like Obama, was a constitutional law professor, and he didn't roll back the Patriot Act. So the Green Party needs to really step up to the plate here, I think, on this issue.
Let's segue to Emanuel on that point, and I'll just just give the people a heads up that Emanuel brings a special criticism that I don't hear, but from him, and that is that before the 9/11 event of 2001, in the election of younger Bush in 2000, there was an event of a national security event that has created bodies of law that are not known to us, and that we are in fact operating at a time when we think that we have constitutional protections, but they're not really being honored. So let's go to Emanuel, and you've heard from Mark, and we're going to loop back. I have a couple of notes I took, Mark, from listening to you that I want to touch back on, and we'll go to Spyder after Emanuel, and we can just start sharing around how do we think about the problem that we're facing under this Trump dictatorship, as you're calling it. So let's go to Emanuel. Go for it, Emanuel. What's your reflections?
Well, I first want to thank Mark for his thoughtful comments and assessment of where we are in this increasingly totalitarian system in the United States. I think Chuck and I completely agree with the goal, and for the most part, in terms of the means as well. And I mean, I may have been critical of the Green Party leadership to some degree, but like Chuck, I'm still with the Green Party. I didn't, abandon it because I was so disappointed. I think it has the greatest potential. So I just want to make a few remarks about what we need to do, and hope we can, in the next step, get more people involved. So this is falling back on, inspired by what Mark said, but falling back also what I wrote previously about a Green Party that can win. It really is critical to start out with the assumption that the Green Party is going to win, that it's not going to get 5% of the vote or 3% of the vote. In this respect, I'm probably more like Trump than I am like Jill Stein. That I feel that the way the Green Party gets some traction, gets on the map, is by taking down the Republican and Democratic Party. And the way you do that is you stand up and you say, these guys have no legitimacy. They're criminals. They've been bought by private equity, and they're basically reporting to private intelligence firms in a totally illegal and unconstitutional manner. And this can be proven. I mean, I can't do it right now, but it certainly can be done. And we have to say that they have no legitimacy to run. And that includes on the Green Party. I mean, if I were in Jill Stein's position, would be first to say not just that Donald Trump should step down, but that he should be arrested. And first impeached and then arrested. And this entire cabinet as well. They're all guilty of massive state crimes and collaboration. And many of the Democrats are as well. So the rhetoric necessary, the approach necessary to get a Green Party that can win has to move into the revolutionary. However, we don't have John Spritzler here, but we have others who take what you might say, even more revolutionary view, which is to say, forget about the Constitution. Let's not be concerned with property rights. Let's go for radical egalitarianism. And I have some serious doubts about that as an approach, in part because it's not American culture. If you throw the Constitution out, you don't really have anything to work with. And also because we know that efforts of egalitarian revolution, whether the French Revolution or the Commune or the Russian Revolution or other efforts, have often gone awry because you need this continuity of institutions, of civilization, of basic manners, has a propriety and proper interaction between individuals and respect, and that moving into a revolutionary mode has real dangers to it. So anyway, I want to say one thing in additional, and that is that if we wanted to have a Green Party that can win, that we have to talk about financing. And this is the bottom line as the Green Party that I know. I've been in the Green Party twice, back 2001 to 2005, and then again, thanks to Chuck, more recently. And that is this. Multinational corporations, banks, billionaires, and others give large amounts of money to the Democratic and Republican Party. When they give, say a billionaire gives $50 million to a political party or candidate, they get back at least $50 million worth of value from their donation. And that's why they give the money. They're going to get, $100 million or $1 billion for that investment. If I give $50 to the Green Party, I am not going to get $50 worth of value from my donation. And it's expected that I'm going to give all this money just for some ideal, pie in the sky ideal. And I think that this is a fundamentally flawed model, that the Green Party should create cooperatives and other efforts so that if you give $50 or $10 a month, whatever, as a working person in the Green Party, you get at least $5, $10, $15, $20 worth of value from your participation in Green Party sponsored activities, events, support, counseling, job opportunities, whatever. And that as long as the Green Party or other alternative parties are working on the basic model that we're going to be progressive, but you're going to throw your money away to us, and we're not going to give you anything better than maybe some pie in the sky dream, then they're not competitive. The only way to be competitive is to create organized communities in which if you give $10 or $100, you're going to get that back in value. And that will get people to actually organize. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Emanuel. Do you want to do a reflect? Okay, you're speaking about giving the Green Party more energy and purpose and meaning. And um, so I would think that the Green Party can grow its ranks. Um, I mean, so by and this is what Mark's alerting us to
Mhm.
this evening is the importance of calling out that the dictatorship, this tending,
Absolutely.
the violation of our civil rights by the Donald, and so Mark, should we go to Spyder? Do you have a reflection? I mean, let me just
Yeah,
then,
I have one kind of, I like the
yeah,
idea in the end, and I would tie it back to one thing. The Uhuru movement, which is also connected to the African People's Socialist Party. One thing I learned about that very small political party is the Uhuru movement does do a lot of things for the community around them. They supply, food kitchens and jobs even. They have several industries that people can work in they're a real alternative to, somebody having to get a job at some giant corporation that doesn't care at all about them. This is primarily for Black people. There are white people that work in the Uhuru movement, that are in solidarity with the African People Socialist Party or the members of it. So I think that is a good idea because if we can form like some sort of cooperative, and build on that, that is a way to bring people in.
well, there you go, and that's very good. So, um, you know, in terms of the Donald and using the courts and deporting people willy-nilly without hearings, um, and he knows that the judiciary, the third leg of our constitutional government, is weak, and it's just an opinion. And apparently, there's this famous, and it was cited on public radio, the Cherokee Nation in the 1830s was being evicted from, Southern Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama,
Right.
and this was the beginning of the Trail of Tears. And I think that what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians in Gaza and at the West Bank is like what we did to the Cherokee. So there was a Supreme Court decision that found in the favor of the Cherokee that they had land rights, they had property rights, they had rights, and these were people who live in Oklahoma. These Indians are called the civilized nations, the civilized,
Right.
because the Cherokee had phoneticized their language. They had become, they had integrated into community as craftspeople and farmers, and famously, some Cherokee had slaves, but Andrew Jackson said, well, it's if the Supreme Court can enforce it, so the power to them. Meanwhile, they conducted 40 years, 20 years, 30, basically 20, I think it's a 20-year genocide or ethnic cleansing of the Southeast. And that's why all those multiple tribes now live in Oklahoma. And we saw the movie by Scorsese on the assassination of the Indians that had oil land underneath their little parcels. And it's all been so wicked ugly. And that's what you're objecting to fundamentally here, Mark, in your appeal for the Green Party to become really energetic in their criticism. Is that, I mean, is what I'm,
Yes,
and I,
yes.
I am, of course, totally on board. And you talk about the consent, there's some consent from the government. The American people themselves are complicit. And, the American people probably supported ethnically cleansing, and they did. I'm absolutely certain they supported cleansing, the Trail of Tears. I know the American people were very excited for the Mexican-American War, 1846. And that was the one where Abraham Lincoln famously called out the big lie of President
Right.
Polk. That Mexicans didn't kill Americans on American soil. The Americans went
Right.
into Mexico and provoked a fight. And it was the first false flag, and Abraham Lincoln was so these are my kind of just about what you're getting at. And I think what we want to talk about, and that I'm interested in talking about from the Green Liberty perspective is generating this, arguments and taking positions that we can organize around and grow our ranks, build our appeal. And young people are objecting to the Gaza genocide. They are connecting it to Israel as an imperial project. And I think what you're interested in is the Green Party. And to Jill Stein's credit, I guess she does acknowledge it as a genocide. But
Right.
And she went to a lot of these protests. She actually got arrested alongside students at Washington University in St. Louis. So she was very active in the stop the anti-genocide protests.
So should we go to do you have
Spyder.
any reflection, Emanuel? You want to kind of just riff on something and then we'll
Well,
go
let Spyder speak first.
Yes. So Spyder, what are your thoughts? I mean, you have some strong opinions about the nature of the power structure. What are you thinking about from what you've heard from Mark on what the Donald is up to and what's going on in Israel?
Well, I'll own that. I do have strong opinions, but I'm just finishing up my dinner.
Okay.
But
Well,
I'll join more completely here in a few minutes. But I will throw this out for right now. I don't think there is the lesser of two evils. I think there's just evil that changes masks. And perhaps in the case of Donald Trump, wears no mask at all. But I don't, from what I see, and if any of you watched the link that I sent today, Biden et al. Was up to some pretty evil shit. So I have a hard time with the lesser of two evils. I'm more of the perspective that there's just evil that has entrenched itself so completely now that all they feel like they have to do is change a mask every once in a while and everything will work. So that's where I'm at.
Right.
okay, we'll finish up your meal there.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I could say something,
Yes,
Chuck,
please,
if you
Emanuel.
don't mind.
Absolutely.
So I say to Mark that I really do appreciate your comments. I hope you apologize earlier. I mean, I had meant just to talk to Chuck about what was on my mind. It was not, particularly, destructive. I'm positive about what we can do together. But I wanted to say that I had proposed repeatedly that we should have events for Green Party members, right? Have a weekly seminar for Green Party members to come and discuss issues, give their opinions, and create a democratic process within the Green Party. And I got no response from any of these initiatives. This is over the last 3 years. And in fact, when I was running as one of only 2 candidates in the Green Party, Cornel West and myself, I was not able to address any Green Party groups, blocked from all of them. So as far as I was concerned, from my worm's eye view of the world, the Green Party was a complete dictatorship, and it blocked out anybody who offered an alternative perspective. So I would say,
Wow.
let's first have democracy in the Green Party.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we need to start from the ground up.
Well, and I think so. The purpose of a Green Liberty Caucus is to bring into the Green Party conversation, you know, ideas that aren't represented and popularly, you know, held. So, you know, one of the problems with many criticism of the Green Party is that they are Democratic Party light, that and that they're not, well, they're not even making strong criticisms of the national security state. They're not making strong criticisms of the power structure, of plutocracy,
Right.
and they're very they don't make any criticism of state crimes. They don't even accept that state crimes are a real thing. They do have in their platform plank, yeah, they have in their platform plank um, a call for investigations into 9/11, and Jill has
Right.
said that. Now, but nobody endorses it. In fact, there's a lot of people that will condemn you and shun you as a conspiracy theorist if you say that the federal COVID program um, was a big lie of being a natural
Right.
event, and that the purpose of it was to evidently get people to accept this mRNA COVID technology. So that this kind of
Right.
conversation where we're speaking frankly and openly is not accepted by, sadly,
Right.
the establishment in the Green Party. Now, the question is, and I think it's their establishment. I think a lot of people, if you spend most of your time listening to NPR, following Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, reading the
Right.
legacy media, your perspective is well formed by that narrative. So, in the Green Liberty side, our criticism, I mean, is one, that state crimes are real and that we should call them out. And we should grow our ranks by condemning the theft of history under what happened
Right.
with JFK and all the 60s assassinations. The theft of,
I
yeah, go ahead, Emanuel.
I want to make a comment if I could,
Yeah.
and especially addressing what Mark brought up. So about Gaza. So I'm happy that the Green Party is addressing Gaza and the killings in Gaza, that it's been critical of America's unconditional support for Israel. However, I feel that there's so many taboo topics within the Green Party, even regarding Israel, that, for example, Jill Stein, I mean, I've read what's on the national page for Green Party recently, and it's really pretty minor. No serious statement, certainly not calling for anybody to resign. And on the issue of Israel, United States, the main issue, I feel, is that the military industrial complex of Israel and the United States have merged. The Trump and Netanyahu administration have merged. The same companies that are undertaking, like Elbit Systems, the attacks on Gaza and the West Bank, are getting contracts for the Mexican-American border and for your shopping malls. I mean, it's the same people. And so what's happening in Gaza is what's happening in America. And that what I found in the Green Party was there was this effort to sort of say, we're in solidarity with these ethnic Palestinians who the Israelis are being mean to for racist reasons. And that this is a fundamental misreading of what's going on. That this is a systematic development of a totalitarian system for governance, which is meant for the entire world. And as the book, The Palestine Laboratory explains, the systems being developed for tracking, for facial recognition, for robots and drones, et cetera, in Israel are being exported everywhere else. So if the Green Party doesn't recognize that Gaza is not just about racist Israelis beating up on poor Palestinians, but it's something bigger and something more immediately relevant to ordinary American citizens, that limits the impact.
Yeah, you're right. Because for one, the Israel lobby is so powerful, you know, that right now they realize that they're losing the information war, that there's a growing number of people that have a negative view of Israel. So there's even open discussions by Zionists about we need to control the digital narrative. We need to get our digital game on here, because they even mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg is Jewish, and why can't we be controlling the narrative better? But they've controlled the politicians, obviously, through either money or through blackmail, with Epstein taking politicians down to, on his Lolita Express, down to
both.
This island, and hooking them up with underage girls. Or if you don't cooperate, you probably get assassinated. And there's more and more people that are trying to tie the Kennedy assassination into 9/11, or into Kennedy,
Wellstone.
and 9/11 as well.
Is the case.
Yeah, and 9/11 as well as possibly being something that was carried out by the Israelis. So there's a lot of different places where Israel seems like it's infiltrated the United States government entirely. And it's hard to say who's controlling who. Is it Israel controlling the United States, or is the United States using Israel as its attack dog? It's kind of unclear where they're so merged at this point.
Well, there are third sort of non-state actors, private equity and billionaire families and others who I think use both United States and Israel for their purposes. And I don't defend Israel, but Israel did not occupy Afghanistan for 20 years. Israel did not invade Iraq, and Israel did not do a lot of these things around the world. It was the United States. Granted that Israel had a lot of influence on that.
Well, supposedly Netanyahu had some influence on the war in Iraq. Like, he was pushing for war.
Oh, for sure.
Let me just interject here, and then we'll go to Spyder. One of the arguments that the radical egalitarian makes, which is a class analysis, and it says Emanuel kind of represented that, does Israel wag the American dog, or is Israel the tail of the American dog? And there's plutocracy. There's this very rich, powerful class that is behind the Zionist project. Essentially, the theory that I'm following is that Israel was not an organic creation of pioneers. It was a contrived drive by a Zionist European project who were financed by billionaires and wanted I think the military, the battleship metaphor is fitting, but so the Israeli people are fodder for this billionaire project to insinuate as people call it, colonial settler nation, and it's and for what end? To control oil, to control the Middle East, to have this insinuation of power in the region, and clearly it's a problematic problem of power structure because of this threat for going after Iran, which is a very frightening prospect. So let's go to Spyder now. What are you thinking about? And I'll just, for the note here, Emanuel has left the meeting. Spyder, what are your thoughts on what we've been talking about?
Well, I just think it's important to point out that the merger between the Israeli military, Mossad, what have you, didn't begin with Trump. I mean, I know that everyone here now knows that, but I think it probably went back maybe as far as Clinton, where this really started. And then with Biden, it really ramped up because Biden has been an ardent Zionist supporter for, I think, his entire political career. Right. So this has been going on for some time.
Well, actually, Mark, one theory I've heard is that the CIA operator that might have been involved in the JFK assassination was also assigned to train the Israelis in setting up their Mossad. That the CIA, that Israel has been a national security, kind of almost a consequence of the National Security Act. I mean, it's been a creation. I mean, their Mossad is tied with CIA. from the
Oh,
get.
yeah.
Well, there you go. That really enhances my point then, because
Oh.
it shows how far back this goes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, under Obama, for example, you can look at, Timber Sycamore, the arming jihadists in Syria to overthrow the Assad regime. And that started unofficially, covertly in 2011 with the CIA and the Mossad working together to arm the Al-Nusra Front, which is these Al-Qaeda linked jihadists, they're terrorists. And then Obama, this program, I guess it was top secret at the time, but it's called Timber Sycamore, where he was arming what he claimed were moderate rebels to fight Assad. But it turns out that he was actually arming the Al-Nusra Front, because the idea there was a moderate rebel was kind of it's kind of a silly term in itself, but I think they even admit to that now, even on Wikipedia, that just armed. It didn't, the people that took up arms were terrorists. But it was with Israel that all got created. They were working hand in glove, the CIA and the Mossad.
Yeah, I'll just loop back around to the statement I made a few minutes ago that this is all basically just different permutations of evil. You elect a black man to the presidency and everybody thinks, wow, we've really done something, but not really, because he's still part of that same evil cabal. And if he wasn't, he probably wouldn't have been elected, or he would have been Wellstone, one or the other.
Well, so
Right.
you're saying that Barack Obama, for all the hope and change and excitement that the country felt when he got elected, he was not a sincere change agent.
No, of course not.
No, the real progressive in that race was Dennis Kucinich, who was came in third place really, but he wasn't allowed into the debate in Nevada that was sponsored by the American coal industry. They wouldn't let Kucinich in there because Obama and Clinton, of course, were talking about clean coal and nuclear and all this other stuff that Kucinich would have really put him on the spot. But yeah, Obama was clearly very friendly with the national security state. You could see that before he even was elected.
Well, and there's all kinds of what do we call it? Kind of rabbit hole theory of that his mother was in the CIA, a professional. She was in the
Oh,
CIA.
really? I didn't know that.
And I think she was in Indonesia in 1965. And so there's there's a whole theory that Obama was, well, he was raised by his grandparents because his mother died of cancer. But he got the nod from Zbigniew Brzezinski and was kind of taken under Zbigniew's wing and Brzezinski's wing. And so he had a meteoric rise into the presidency. He ran for a Congress seat in Chicago, but didn't win, and wasn't accepted by the African American community as a kind of an authentic, I guess, but did win the Senate, and he voted against the Iraq War in 2003, one of the lone holdouts, I guess, but that gave him creds as a change agent and someone who would go against the establishment order. But now we know that he did a fine job fulfilling the forever wars.
Yeah, it took us from 2 wars to 7.
So this just for the record here, we're going to end our conversation. We're going to close the recording, but
I think we should go on a little longer because we've got a few things I should mention.
Okay.
One Obama, is you talk about the continuation of assault on civil liberties that began under Bush with the Patriot Act.
Okay, so let's just observe that under the Patriot Act, which we on this call, we accept that the 9/11 event was a state crime. It was not the Arabs
Right.
didn't do it. And the anthrax attack was a state crime, false flag, in order to get the Patriot Act passed. After the Patriot Act was passed and after 9/11, there's that famous warning from one of the operatives. Now we have to expect forever wars. This was the term.
Right.
The term forever wars was brought into our consciousness, and Obama fulfilled that mission. So where should we go next on your?
Well, okay, so this is
back
the
to
thing,
your-
is the Patriot Act, you know, I never thought it was justified. You know, even if, you know,
Well,
even if by
the Patriot Act was written up.
oh,
5
long
years
before 9/11. It
And
was
Senator Biden ran the committee that developed that
right.
law.
He claims that he was, when he ran for 2020, that he was the author of it. Of course, I think that's bogus. It was written long before that. It was written by somebody that goes all the way back to the Iran-Contra scandal, I believe. But anyway, the Obama administration continued with Section 1021 and Section 1022 of the 2012 NDAA, which took away habeas corpus for any American citizen that was considered to be an Al-Qaeda terrorist, and they could be indefinitely detained, and the government didn't need to tell their friends or family where they were located. And so this was something that kind of a lot of people didn't pay much attention to. It was because Chris Hedges and Daniel Ellsberg sued the Obama administration, and they won in a lower court. But then the very day that it was, you know, they saw their victory, the Obama administration appealed the decision, and the appeals court overturned or sided with Obama, and it never went to the Supreme Court. Anyway, so because I guess Hedges was involved in some other case that he lost, and then he lost. The court said he didn't have standing or something along that lines. But you know, that was the next step, and then we go on to Trump, and I think the COVID program was a response in exercising control over the population by fear. And then we also saw social media censorship stifling any scientific debate on COVID. And this continued, of course, into the Obama administration. And then, of course, you have these two steps here towards fascism in 2020 as COVID pandemic was the external and internal threat. So that was that we invoked that as a threat. And then we restricted the press over COVID information and any debate. And then, of course, Biden comes in, and you know, more social media censorship around COVID vaccines. And then this led to censorship over individuals opposing the Western narrative that the Ukraine war was an unprovoked invasion by Russia. So if you didn't agree with that and you put out a lot of information, like say Jackson Hinkle did, that you could probably get your YouTube channel either demonetized or completely suspended, or your PayPal or your Patreon, in the case of Jackson Hinkle, were all suspended. And then Consortium News was another voice that was telling the truth about the war in Ukraine that had their PayPal account suspended, and they couldn't even get their money out of it. And the gray zone, I believe, was GoFundMe wouldn't give them their money. They had to call up all the people that, or tell everybody that donated money to them to go to GoFundMe to get their money back. And then they had to find some other site like GoFundMe that would guarantee that they would get their donations.
So, Mark, you're citing these examples as evidence of dictatorship.
Right, of this assault on civil liberties, you know, and of course, RT got shut down. I mean, this just kept going. And then, of course, the whole crackdown on Palestinian rights student protesters began under Biden. You know, Biden was the first to call those protests anti-Semitic, and we saw 3 university presidents fired You
Right.
know,
That happened under Biden.
right. And you know, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act was introduced by Congress. It didn't pass the Senate. I guess the Senate never voted on it, but it passed the House. And so that assault already began. So Trump just kind of is just building on what was already starting to happen under that.
Well, like I said, in my post from today, that this was a perfect setup for Trump. People like the gray zone and due dissidents have been kind of hinting at this for some time, that Trump couldn't have been set up any better. Biden
Right.
really, really laid the groundwork.
Yeah, over 15 months of a genocide. I mean, at the time when he left office, he was the most horrible president in my lifetime. And then people thought, well, maybe Trump is going to take a different program as far as war, because he wanted to end the Ukraine war. But obviously, he's just been identical on Gaza and on Yemen.
Yeah, I think it was just more of the same, Obama with his hope and change kind of deal. It was just something to sell to the public, to get over the line. And then once that happens, hey, I'm going right back to the same old game plan.
Exactly.
People are just I don't know. I don't know whether it's just they want to maintain a certain comfort level, so they make themselves gullible. I don't know what it is. When Obama was running, and I would go into these little boutiques and stuff, like in a mall or something, and I would see all this Obama stuff hanging on the wall, I just immediately was turned off. And as it turned out, you guys probably know this, Obama got a marketing award from a major marketing firm for his presidential candidacy. Freaking marketing award. So what does that say about the position of the president of the United States?
Right.
In business.
Well, it's another form of the corruption of the Constitution, and it's the monetization of everything in society, up to the point where the president himself treats his presidency as a business. Well,
as a business.
As a business. And the Donald, of course, is the most corrupt with his crypto that he's advanced from.
Oh, he does something every day that's just, it's hard to believe. It would be funny if it wasn't
Well,
real.
then I think what's coming up here is a lack of scathing critique from the
definitely.
Green Party.
The media. Yeah.
Right. I mean, isn't that kind of what we would like to hear from our
definitely.
leadership?
Well, we live in a real Hollywood culture, and I think that needs to be identified, because Obama was somebody that clicked with people because he was a great speaker, and Trump, I think, he was somebody that was obviously in the had a reality TV show, so he's kind of been down that road. But he's somebody that a lot of people hear his voice, and it's very anxiety provoking. Where when Biden came in, and this older, it wasn't like the younger Biden who was very angry. The older Biden was very kind of calm, and it almost put people to sleep. And I think a lot of liberals, I would talk to them about, this is horrible what Biden's doing, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, and it was kind of like they didn't get the same reaction. And of course, all these people that are out in the streets that are members of Indivisible right now, none of them protested anything Biden did. This is very partisan stuff, unfortunately.
So let's loop back to what's the criticism that we're fundamentally making here, and that transcends the Biden-Trump. If we have a duopoly, if it's, as Nader called it, a Tweedledee and Tweedledum, then this going from Biden to the Donald, I mean, the Donald is clearly a different president than Biden. And I don't want to, somehow suggest that it's not different, that he is different. He's a shock and awe president. We've talked about this, that he in his own right is a psyop on the nation. And, but they both serve a plutocratic power structure.
Right,
They're both
exactly.
carrying water for the power elites. And so in the end, the Green Liberty Caucus would counsel Green candidates to come out explicitly against the plutocratic power structure and say
Right.
You said it.
they
No,
are a fundamental problem, they got to go. And we need to replace it with a real democracy of the people, probably decentralized power so that the bankers don't control us. And there's people talking about this. There's people thinking about this across the country that are kind of in their silo. They're doing their thing and they're doing their Substack. But what the Green Party should be doing is creating a clearing for these multiple voices to come together. Instead, the establishmentarians try to control the narrative and block out the voices that are present on our call right now.
Well, I would go as far as, I guess Howie Hawkins was in favor of the Ukraine war. He bought into this whole idea that Russia was, invading Ukraine unjustly.
He's considered a hawk on the Ukraine war.
Right. And I think that's a real mistake for the Green Party to ever align itself with US imperialism, because clearly the war in Ukraine, and I think John Mersheimer said it best, that Russia exhausted all diplomatic options. Like it had tried diplomacy and it failed. And so it was a defensive action, which is what the African People's Socialist Party allege, probably why they ended up being charged as foreign agents of Russia, because they went to Russia once and then they said that about the war in Ukraine, that it was a defensive action by Russia. But I think it's the Green Party has to always point out that all wars are US imperialist wars. There's no just war here. There's no, the national security state and the need for this strong military is nonsense. It's the Democrats and Republicans say, oh, we've got to have a strong defense and blah blah blah. But it's what good has it done us as Americans, as American people? It's harmed our country. It's taken a lot of money away from that we could be using for other projects. It's environmental destruction. It's completely morally bankrupt. The way we're destroying people's lives around the world. So I think yeah, we have to call out these two parties as being complicit in full spectrum dominance. That's the goal of U.S. hegemony.
Don't forget.
Go ahead,
Also,
Spyder.
don't forget also that the violation of the Minsk Accord sent a pretty strong message to Russia about what they were really facing. And that doesn't get brought up often enough either. Russia was operating in good faith, and they essentially got slapped in the face. So what do you expect them to think about future, relationships to the West when something like that happens? I mean, you can see where they are going to be on a razor's edge when it comes to these things, because they really don't have someone that can operate on the world stage in a way that you can trust. I mean, it seems like anymore,
Right.
It's just whoever stands to benefit, go for it. Don't worry about agreements or treaties. Bringing it back to the Indian situation, the treaties were all violated. So where's the integrity? It's gone.
Well, yeah, and I think that we as Americans, or as Green Party members, that needs to be brought up. It's not enough to simply gain power. Those that have been in power need to be held accountable because of what they have done.
And that's the Green Liberty sensibility, the demand for accountability, transparency, and protection for whistleblowers. And you mentioned John Mearsheimer, and I have at the articles section in the Green Liberty Caucus.org website, there's an interview with Jeffrey Sachs and Chris Hedges. Now, Chris Hedges is someone Mark Spyder and I, we all talk about, we like Chris Hedges, but we also talk about how he kind of hits up against the invisible,
Yeah.
that glass wall.
He has a threshold.
He has a threshold that he stops at. But this was an interesting one where Jeffrey Sachs talks about his book about JFK's quest for peace. And one of the arguments I make is that our movement should appeal to the stolen history, that our movement is to get accountability for the theft of possibilities lost when Kennedy was killed. And he goes into JFK's quest for peace, but then in this interview, he jumps ahead into the Ukraine war and does a pretty good debrief of how Putin was essentially goaded into this war on account of the NATO incursion, and so it's worth looking at. And there's links to other articles. I think Mersheimer's argument that now on a Green Party list I posted about Mersheimer, and a classical Marxist answered and said Mersheimer has no credibility because he doesn't advance a class theory of what's happening there. Well, come on, he's talking about geopolitics, and he was talking about if NATO goes into Ukraine, Ukraine will be wrecked, and it's being wrecked. And I think that Donald sincerely. Well, so here's the problem: 1/3 of Ukraine has already been sold off with land lease rights to Monsanto and that sort.
To BlackRock controls most.
Yeah. So in any case, good analysis from Mearsheimer. I think
we're getting some back.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead. Emanuel, want to say hi? Are you on a train or something?
I'm outside in a cafe.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Keep listening.
You should mute. Somebody should, yeah, because we're hearing some back noise.
Okay, so those are
that's the important point about Ukraine, though, because it's really the oligarchs that this war is for. And there was a conference in 2013 at the Chamber of Commerce with Gina Raimondo, Biden's Secretary of Commerce, and the Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, and this woman that was from Citigroup, and people from ExxonMobil and IBM, and they all were there because they saw Ukraine, like this woman from Citigroup says, we need to win this war, because she had investors waiting, to rebuild Ukraine with a public-private partnership. So it's really about oligarchy, that we're there.
Yep.
It's land grab, it's power, and in its most raw and brazen form. And I think that's where Howie Hawkins, who defends the NATO incursion into Ukraine on the grounds that the Ukrainians are entitled to sovereignty, he is not acknowledging the profound geopolitical power play of NATO as a hegemonic force using Ukraine as a pawn,
right,
to wear down Russia and so on.
Exactly. I mean, that's and the whole thing about, you look at Kennedy's speech and what, Kennedy, of course, went through the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was the United States was not going to allow the Soviet Union to have missiles in Cuba. We almost went to war over that, but he negotiated, and the Soviets removed their missiles from Cuba, and the United States secretly removed its missiles from Turkey at the time, and promised not to invade Cuba. But that's what Kennedy did on the surface. I guess secretly he didn't tell the American people, but he removed but anyway, so what I'm saying about this is what you have in Ukraine is a Cuban Missile Crisis on steroids, because where we want to not allow a foreign military base on our soil, or anywhere near our soil. I mean, in the whole Western Hemisphere, we've got several NATO bases on the Russian border, and we seem to think nothing. The United States and NATO seems to think nothing of it. And this is what's just, to me, just crazy. And of course, then like Spyder mentions, the whole conflict in the Donbass, which is clearly, Ukraine ignored the ceasefire agreement like it has ignored the ceasefire agreement just recently, because Ukraine and Russia just agreed to about a few weeks ago to a 30-day pause or ceasefire on energy infrastructure. And Ukraine has been violating that almost daily for a while. You hardly hear about that in the Western media, of course, but.
I have another article that I posted early on when the Ukraine war broke out, and I basically built it around Mearsheimer's warning that if you invade, Ukraine will be wrecked. And you all remember the peace dividend of when the Berlin Wall came down. There was a palpable hope that we could move into an era of peace. And again,
Right.
that interview with Jeffrey Sachs really captures that loss, and that it wasn't lost, it was undermined, it was prevented
By Clinton.
by Clinton, by the plutocracy, by the oligarchs. Right. Clinton's a puppet. All these guys are
right.
At the military. So here's the Green Liberty analysis is one I just want to kind of, because we probably, for the purposes of the length of a video, well, we could go for another 10 minutes, but the criticism that I think is salient is that we were warned by Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex, and Kennedy heeded that warning and lost his life for it. And then there was a series of the 60s assassinations that created this elite impunity. I think the elite impunity was in fact already in place from the Jim Crow day, the Jim Crow, that capacity to lynch and never be held account is the most gross, brazen form of impunity.
You see, now you're getting down to the issues that nobody likes to talk about, and that's what we need to talk about, I think.
Well, and our country's haunted by this, Spyder, as you know, and the Tulsa firebombing in 21 is that same impunity. So the point, I guess, is that there's this long history of elite impunity, and I mean, my point is that we do need to call these things out. We need to make part of our political practice a criticism of these things called state crimes, and that we use the language of state crime because the evidence clearly indicts the ruling class. And the JFK being flown out of Texas, it was the state's right to hold the body. The feds will say, well, this is national security, so we had to say, well, national security is the
that's become a little tool. National security is always their ace in the hole.
It's their ace in the hole. And so this is what we're haunted by today. We're haunted by the failure to get the accountability. And so, the 60s, the 9/11, and now the COVID, and people who follow this are deeply concerned of this digital currencies, the power of AI. David Hughes talks about this, emerging techno-totalitarianism, and I'll close with this, the COVID lockdown was triggered when the World Health Organization, a non-government kind of extra whatever outside the United States sovereignty, made a declaration, and then the United States used it to then go into lockdown and subject us to social distancing, the masking, the crushing of the economy. And this was all initiated by Department of Defense protocol under national security measures to introduce the COVID countermeasure as the answer to SARS-CoV-2. So we are living through what David Hughes calls omni-war, that there are these events, and we could go into a number of rabbit holes on this as political truthers. I mean, I think we're all political truthers, and Green Liberty is where political truth meets, revolutionary theory of liberating from the plutocracy that's telling the lies that they use to then have power over us. I mean, this is not an unreasonable way to think about our predicament. Is it, Mark? Do you?
No, it's not unreasonable at all. As far as the COVID program, the Congress passed the CARES Act as a response, which, didn't really give just the average American probably a lot. It threw some crumbs out there, but it basically was the largest upward transfer of wealth in history, because the banks, there was all of a sudden there were just the Federal Reserve, and I think the Congress initially initiated something like $2.1 trillion, to keep the economy afloat. And so the banks were just given all this money by Congress and the Federal Reserve, and the fat cats on Wall Street were just using that cheap money, because there was very low interest rates at the time, to fuel speculation, and the stock market went way up. So people that had a lot of money, the billionaires, got much richer, where 85 million people fell into poverty. So it was, that was another program that completely benefited the rich, and showed how you can just steal everybody's wealth on Main Street.
In terms of rabbit hole conspiracy theory, there's this interesting notion that, they did Event 201 in October of 2019, where they gamed out the COVID event. Are you aware of that, Mark?
Not completely, no.
Yeah, Event 201, it's in the COVID truth literature. It was an actual gaming event. They do these gaming events, and people who study these gaming events, you actually can learn what they are intending. And in any case, this is where Avril Haines famously said, we'll flood the zone with media. And if you've noticed that flooding the zone has now become a popular term, it's in our language now. We flood the zone when, the Donald is flooding the zone with his, executive orders and creating this shock and awe. And so they were aware that under the COVID event, people would be terrified, because they would be given pictures of people falling on the street and dying. We would hear stories of people dying from the COVID, and they played us, and we were, manipulated, if you will. So that was the 201 event with Avril Haines, and I'm simply trying to make a point that and I'm kind of losing my point, that these events and the COVID event are part of what we're being subject to, and how they have consolidated power.
Right, exactly.
Go ahead, Mark. Spyder, you have a thought?
Yeah, I wanted to loop back to something you said a while back about the lack of scathing criticism. I think that's an important point of focus if you want to talk about how Green Liberty or any alternative to the plutocracy is going to present itself. It's really getting bad, and I made a post to that effect to this thread a few days ago. It's getting so bad that it's even hard to find scathing criticism in the alternative media. I know of about 3 sources I can go to where I can pretty consistently get scathing criticism. All the rest of it, regardless of how people think, whether they think it's progressive media or they think it's the truth, like a lot of people think that you go to NPR to get the truth. Well, that's the farthest thing from the truth. NPR has become just another propaganda mouthpiece. So it is getting so bad, as I just pointed out, that even in the alternative media now, if you are actually going to do a critical analysis, it's very hard to find scathing criticism. They all seem to be, especially now with this sword that seems to be hanging over everybody, with fear of saying anything negative about Israel or talking about opposing any agenda that the Trumpsters are putting out. It seems like some of the alternative media that I used to think was fairly critical, they're starting to kind of back off, and they're starting to kind of mince their words. So I think the scathing criticism is critical, and I guess it's going to take some courage to really start making it happen, but I think it's important nonetheless.
Well, the Green Liberty scathing criticism is we're being lied to, that these events that we don't talk about should be talked about, and that's what we've tried to do in the Green Party, is simply create a caucus where people who speak and think as we do, and we're not lunatics, we're not deluded, we're free thinkers, and we're free ranging in what we think about, but we're all committed to freedom. I think and not being dominated by, and not being lied to, and not being tricked. And I think a lot of what this movement, and I think I say Green Liberty is in the truth movement, but we go beyond just the truth, because we want to support building a movement to liberate from.
Well, you want accountability too,
and get accountability along the way, and basically change the counter narrative, because basically we're in a counter revolutionary period. We're in a period where we, the people, are on the run. We are being further and further limited in if everything from the controlled narratives, and then to being gaslighted by the mainstream media. People who are prominent voices get targeted, get deplatformed. Doctors that treated COVID infections have been attacked and lost their licenses. So we really are, it's not hyperbole to say that there isn't an emerging techno-totalitarianism. You can support this from multiple perspectives. And the perspective you touched on tonight, Mark, was the immediate, events of the Donald, and how he's, your point was that the duopoly, or the perceived that there's two parties, the belief in the authentic, different parties led somehow to the Donald, getting elected.
Right. Well, most people are voting, when you talk to people about who they're voting for, a lot of Americans are going like, well, I don't really like this guy, but he's a hell of a lot better than this other guy. Right. And that's kind of where, and that swings both ways, and there's people, I think a lot of people have voted for Trump because they didn't like Trump, but but Biden was obviously so toxic with the genocide, facilitating a genocide in Gaza and leading us right up to World War III with Russia, et cetera, and the economy. But, so I think the thing that's different about Trump is that, we have been lied to, and people bought the lie on the war in Ukraine. They bought the whole lie about Libya, why Obama invaded Libya, claiming that Gaddafi was killing his own people and giving his troops Viagra to go out and rape women and et cetera. And all that was a lie. And then Assad was gassing his own people with chemical weapons, and that was a lie. But I think with Trump, Trump's telling lies, but they're so transparently false. Like the fact that these people are in CDOT because they're criminal gangs, even though they're being designated as terrorists, or the rounding up these young protesters who are protesting the Gaza genocide, and and claiming they're a threat to national security or the U.S. the foreign policy of the United States is just such a transparent bunch of nonsense, or that we need to fight Yemen, we need to bomb Yemen because they're blocking ships, they're blocking shipping, they're actually just blocking Israeli ships. And that shipping blockade would be lifted the minute that Israel stops. But so Trump's lies aren't really sticking, but he's at the point now where he's no longer trying to necessarily manufacture consent. He's just deciding that he can just get away with it and he can just subvert the rule of law. And that's what he's doing in the case of these immigrants that are down in CDOT. And I think you're going to see more of that under Trump, where it doesn't matter what the public thinks. This is his last term, and he's going to try to hold on to power. Who knows? Maybe beyond his next term.
Can we allow that the Donald is? I mean, if we accept that the Dems and the Republicans are not an authentic, that they're both controlled by plutocracy.
Right.
Okay, so we, the people, are led to believe that we have an authentic difference in choice. I think we can acknowledge that the Donald is quite different than Biden, but in the end, if you look at how is Israel supported under Biden and how is Israel supported under Trump, it's the same.
Right.
The only difference, Chuck, is presentation. Yeah, Trump's presentation is different than Biden's, but the bottom line is the end result is the same.
Exactly. And I think this is kind of what Mark's the theme of his presentation this evening has been. And so what we're trying to do, I mean, sadly, we support Jill Stein, running a third party, running an insurgent campaign, running to call out the genocide, which she does. She's pro-worker. But what she doesn't do is condemn plutocracy for their wicked, evil deeds and operating a deep state on our country. She doesn't say that.
Right.
I don't know why that's so.
She doesn't.
I honestly don't know why that's so. Spyder, why do you think that's so hard for her to acknowledge? I mean, to me, it's like obvious.
I think because the audience has become so used to the lack of scathing criticism that now they think that scathing criticism is a bad thing. And I think a lot of these people who are in her position think, well, I can't really say that because that's going to make too many people uncomfortable. So I'll just say this, which is a dumbed down version of what really is happening. And I think Jill Stein might be susceptible to that.
Well, and I think it's the fear of being shunned. It's the fear of being ostracized. It's the fear of losing your job. And so I think, we're from Oregon here. This is the this is the Green Liberty Caucus, Oregon Pacific Green Party. And we had Jason Call come on to our call at a convention and representing the Jill Stein campaign. He said, we are for vaccines. It's like, what? Because he knew that there were anti-COVID vaccine people on the call. And he said, just for the record, we are, quote, for vaccines. Now, Jill is officially says she supports, she's not for mandates, but she doesn't condemn the how the COVID mRNA tech has been insinuated, which means introduced by stealth. And it's now normalized that you take mRNA tech shots. It's like no big deal. So don't get me going down that rabbit hole. But
that's legitimate though in a way, because the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party, has a scathing criticism of capitalism and very much covers all the worker strikes, but they totally go along with the vaccines. So and that's, they don't question it at all. They don't tie in the fact that these giant corporations like Pfizer are making all this money and they can't be sued because they're exempt from any liability. So it's a perfect business to be in. You can You can get everybody to take this thing because for their health, and if they get bad side effects, too bad, can't sue us.
These are the lockdown left. This is the slur that the right wing puts onto the lefties, the lockdown left, the people that said, go for it, lock us down, make us safe. And it was presented as a public health matter, but it was really a Department of Defense operation. Warp Speed was the Department of Defense delivering the vaccine. And it just kind of went over people's head. So
They're experimental vaccines that were never fully tested like most vaccines have to be tested.
And exactly. And so, I mean, there's so much we could, kind of unpack on this, but so let's put a ribbon on our conversation. We've got an hour and a half, and we're going to have this will be a recording. It'll be posted at the, we'll have a Yahoo, although we might get in trouble with Yahoo. No, not Yahoo, with YouTube, because we've condemned the COVID. If you badmouth COVID, YouTube will deplatform you.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't.
However, I have a Rumble post, and we'll post this at Rumble.
I think you should. I think you post it both places, because I don't think we're probably getting enough of an audience that it matters at this point.
Well, no, I have no audience on my YouTube, and they still.
Wow.
I've had 3 recordings blocked on YouTube because they hit. There are some things that you absolutely YouTube is Google, and it really is the mainstream.
Right. Well, that's certainly a real issue nowadays, is the fact that they've blocked all this debate about it. But I don't think we've gone too far on this, because I'm not scientifically proclaiming that people should not. I'm not saying people shouldn't get vaccinated. That's if people want to get vaccinated, that should be their decision, not mine. They'll just say that right now for the sake of YouTube, to say that I do believe that this debate should not be censored, because, and I'm talking about between real scientists, because it has been censored.
Right. And so, Mark, give us a summary. Yeah, Spyder, what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to make one point that's kind of like, it's come to the surface, even in our conversation a couple of times, without having defining words put to it. And I want to put the defining words to it. And those defining words are hypocrisy and double standard. I think the general media consumer now kind of those terms kind of go right over his head, again, because people have gotten so used to it. But it's become so blatant now that the U.S. foreign policy is very selective, and it relies on double standard. It's okay here if this serves our national interests, quote unquote, but it's not okay over here because it doesn't serve our national interests. Total double standard for the same activity, whether it's genocide or breaking a treaty or whatever. And I think if you're going to have scathing criticism, those 2 terms need to come to the surface: hypocrisy and double standard. They go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely. And then the big lies, and is what so this is a good fight, you guys. It's good to resist this power structure for what it's worth. Let's remind anybody who's watching this that we have First Amendment 5 freedoms, and that's to speak and publish and assemble and choose religion and seek redress for our grievances. And when we talk about state crimes, that is a seeking for redress of the grievance, and that's the mere talking and acknowledging and characterizing and calling out a state crime is a First Amendment event. It's the first, it's what got the Constitution passed, because the holdouts said, well, we're not going to create this central authority and power structure and so on if there aren't some guaranteed rights. And that's what we're fighting for. And that's what, so that this is to put the loop on what you're initially raising, Mark, is the civil rights catastrophe. And let me just say this, that when a student comes to this country as an international student they have a visa to be in the country, they're a student, they go to the university. As far as I'm concerned, they are afforded the same rights as they're a guest in our country, and they're treated like an American citizen. Your right to criticize genocide is like absolute categorical, not to be infringed on. And the Donald is completely being a rude motherfucker around how he's treating guests in our country. And especially in the case of students with visas, and some of these people are full-on green card holders, and the guy is absolutely an abusive bore, and he's doing a psyop on the nation with this project. Mark,
Yes.
Rolofson, and then Spyder, give us some closing thoughts. We're going to end our recording,
Okay.
and we can chat around afterwards. But let's wrap this.
Well, there's one. I guess there's one person that actually did get released from that was being held. What's his name? Mohsen Modal was released from detention. I guess a Vermont judge said he's letting him out of jail while his case is ongoing. But he's one of the students that's, I guess he's a Columbia student that's.
Did you see
Trump
his
wants to
public
deport.
statement?
No, I haven't seen his public statement.
Well, he really stuck his neck out. He said, I want to state clearly to the Trump administration, I'm not afraid of you. He said that, and the
Wow.
crowd went crazy. So he essentially is throwing down a gauntlet. He's challenging the Trump people to really come after him, I guess.
Wow, that's great. That's very bold. I mean, I think that's kind of where we're at, and the Democrats aren't really doing a whole lot with this. There's a lot of complicity because the Democrats are very silent on these people that have been arrested, these students that have been arrested and thrown in ICE detention centers. You know, they would rather not have to weigh in on anything to do with Israel.
That's really the bottom line there, Mark. They don't want to do anything that touches on Israel. That's really it.
Right. They serve the same masters, and that's what people don't realize. And I think there's this real effort. You look at these Sanders rallies that have went on recently, and the Spyder Oligarchy tour that Bernie's on, that I guess was initiated the same day of the Workers Strike Back conference that Kshama Sawant is the leader of that movement, and brought in Chris Hedges and Jill Stein to speak, and Amazon workers and other workers. Bernie started that whole thing, but he's been at these rallies, he's been saying, Israel has a right to defend itself. And he's been getting a lot of pushback, people raising Palestinian flags and I guess being arrested in Idaho for just raising a Palestinian flag and saying free Palestine, and Bernie being silent on their arrest. And then some people, I guess Bernie went on this rant about how we have to be really careful about how we use the word genocide, and people like yelling at him and saying, it is a genocide what's going on right now. And so and this kind of exposes the fraud in his whole oligarchy tour. And
did you watch the clip?
Yes, I did. On the Biden.
Yeah. So Biden and AOC, they're out there, and they've got people just, like trained seals clapping and barking.
Right. AOC saying that the Biden administration was tirelessly working to get a ceasefire.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's come out that was a total lie.
Well, it was nonsense in the first place, because did anybody believed it? Because we control the flow of weapons. It's like, hey, we're writing the check. Like they said, due dissidence, all you got to do is, turn off the tap and it's going to stop. And and, or threaten to never give them any more weapons ever again, and it would stop very quickly. But yeah, the whole idea is Bernie is doing exactly what Miriam Adelson, Trump's big donor, that's a Zionist, that gave Trump $100 million. Bernie's doing exactly what she wants him to do, and that is get up there and say Israel has a right to defend itself, and it's not we can't really call it genocide yet, and of course.
Well, one of the things about the total annihilation of Gaza, the Trump remark that, hey, Palestinians should just go away so we can rebuild it, in a glitzy boutique, waterfront mall with high rises. That all belies the assertion by Israel that they need to wipe out Hamas and destroy the Palestinians in order to make Israel safe.
Right.
The October 7th event was I think we accept that it was not an authentic event, that it was a contrived event, it was a let it happen event, that Netanyahu wanted hostages to be taken so they can draw this whole thing out and they can completely destroy. It gave them the perfect boogeyman, divide and conquer. And so what we need to really appreciate is we are witnessing the billionaire class manipulating the Israeli people to be terrified of the Palestinian people, to see no possibility for peace, and everyone's being played. And we need to control democratic destiny to avoid a technocratic fate of this of where things are going by this plutocracy. So,
well, we've really, what we've done to Gaza, and I use the word we, I mean the United States has done, is unforgivable in many ways. I mean, in all ways, because not only has it killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and destroyed Gaza, but all that rubble, the dust from that rubble is going to get spread around. It's going to end up causing a lot of people to get sick, and lung diseases and cancer, because it's a very toxic dust, a lot of it. And so we've essentially destroyed that whole region with our bombs, because we made the decision to give them those bombs, and that was a decision that was made by both Democrats and Republicans to do this.
Right, absolutely. Final thought, and we're going to end the recording. We can hang out and chat afterwards.
Yeah, Spyder, do you have something you'd like to add?
Put a bow on this ribbon here, or this package.
Well, you know me and my strong opinions. I'm all about the scathing criticism. So that's where I'm going to throw my 2 cents in on that.
Well, do you accept that we in our movement need to target plutocracy and the subterfuge, the lies that they tell, that we need to hammer on that. And this goes back to the Bernie. They're using the word oligarchy. Fine, let's use it, but they're using it in order to not be authentic in the criticism about it.
Right. They want to corral people inside the Democratic Party, which is essentially run by oligarchs. And that's the thing about, where all the focus right now is on Elon Musk, and we can certainly condemn Elon Musk, but he's not the only billionaire out there that's the problem. And there's plenty of billionaires like Soros and Bill Gates that have given lots of money, and even Elon Musk that gave lots of money to the Democratic Party, that are really behind the Democratic Party machine. And so I think that is ultimately, yes, it's got to be more a fight against oligarchy, and literally that's because they control both political parties.
So let's carry that Bernie AOC. Let's pick up on the
Gotta watch the clip. Gotta watch the clip I sent.
Oh, the Rumble.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I started watching, and I will finish. We're not gonna introduce it now. And
no.
But so this is so the people anybody that's watching this, you have been on this is an Oregon chapter of the Green Liberty Caucus, and people who are friendly to the Green Liberty themes of liberation, of calling out big lies, fighting plutocracy, demanding truth for justice. We need to have a chapter in every state, in every area and locale, and bring our fight, bring our criticism, practice our First Amendment freedom rights, and resist, and go beyond resisting and actually liberating. And that's what the egalitarian possibility is all about. And you can find more reports on this at the Green Liberty Caucus website, and for anybody who's watching. So I'm going to go ahead. The Mark Rolofson and Spyder, again, we're from Oregon and we're activists, and we're trying to build a movement. Liberation Coalition is the big picture goal for the Green Liberty project. All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for this discussion, and thank you for watching.
Okay. Thanks, Mark, for getting us going on that with that great essay.